There is a silent collapse that occurs just before the greatest expansion a human soul can undergo. Arthur Sterling called this instant the crossing of the meridian, the moment when the sun of psychic energy stops rising and begins its slow, terrifying and necessary descent toward the interior. Most people experience this as a breakdown. Sterling recognized it as the opening ceremony of the greatest chapter a human psyche can inhabit. If you are here, understand something. In the territory of the unconscious, there is no chance. You did not find this video by coincidence. You found it because something in you is already standing at the threshold, already sensing that what you have been sustaining, performing and defending is no longer enough. That beneath the structure of your current life, something archetypal and essential is pressing to be born. Sterling spent 4 decades studying the second half of life, the phase he named individuation, and what he discovered was extraordinary. Before the golden age arrives, before the person you were always destined to be finally walks through the door, the psyche sends a precise sequence of signals. They do not arrive as celebrations. They arrive as ruptures, as losses, as a sudden and inexplicable inability to keep pretending. Most interpret these signs as collapses. They panic. They run back to the mask, to the performance, to the version of themselves the world rewarded. But the rare ones, those who will one day live a life that gives them chills, recognize what these signs truly are. Evidence. Evidence that the golden age has not only begun, evidence that it was always inevitable. Today, we will go through the 6 precise signs that, according to Sterling, always appear before a human life undergoes its most magnificent expansion. If you recognize yourself in 3 of them, you are not failing. You are being forged. There is a specific type of exhaustion that has no name in the modern vocabulary. It is not the fatigue of overwork. It is not the burnout of someone who has pushed too hard for too long. It lives deeper. It lives in the part of you that has been performing, not just at the office, not just in social gatherings, but the fundamental act of being a particular version of yourself for so long that the performance has become indistinguishable from the person. And one day, without warning, the energy required to sustain it simply runs out. Sterling called the structure behind this performance the mask. He took the term from the Latin, which designated the clay masks worn by actors in Greek and Roman theaters. These masks served 2 simultaneous purposes. They projected a specific role for the audience and amplified the actor's voice so it would reach the back of the arena. The mask was functional, the mask was necessary, but the mask should never, under any circumstances, be confused with the face. Sterling observed that every modern human being builds this mask. It begins in childhood piece by piece, as we learn which version of ourselves receives warmth and which version receives silence. The child who learns that being pleasant produces safety will spend 30 years perfecting pleasantness. The child who learns that achievement produces love will pursue achievement long after love has ceased to be the real reward. When adulthood arrives, the mask is so finely sculpted, so deeply integrated into every interaction, that we completely forget the original act of construction. We look in the mirror and believe we are seeing a face. We do not remember that we are seeing a mask. And this is where the first inner death begins, in silence. For years, perhaps decades, this mask served magnificently. It won the career, it secured the relationships, it brought the approval, the security, and the status that the first half of life demands. Sterling never despised the mask as mere vanity. He understood it as a necessary negotiation with the collective. The mask is the agreement you made with the world. The agreement said, I will be the version of me that you can tolerate, and in exchange, you will give me a seat at the table. But there is a psychic law that Sterling documented in 4 decades of clinical practice. The core, the totality of who you really are, the vast and intelligent unconscious that existed even before the mask was built, does not stop growing because the mask has been perfected. Beneath the surface of your professional composure, beneath the smile that appears at the right moment, the real person continues to expand, pressing outward against a container built for a smaller and older version of you. One day the container cracks. The first sign that your golden age has begun is this exact moment of psychological bankruptcy. Sterling used this word deliberately. Think of your psychic energy as currency. Each time you smiled while you were grieving, Each time you said yes to a project that bored your soul to the core, each time you silenced a radical idea to avoid the discomfort of being different, you paid a tax. A small withdrawal from a reserve you didn't even know was finite. For years, you operated at a hidden deficit. You borrowed energy from your future, from your health, from your road not taken to keep the performance running. Then, one day, without theatrical announcement, the bank of the unconscious closes its doors. You are not losing your shine. You are not in burnout. Your soul has gone on strike. The mask must go bankrupt before the real person can allow themselves to live. If this phenomenon has found you, if there is something inside that recognizes this nameless exhaustion, comment below the word threshold. It is not just engagement. It is an archetypal seal. It is the sign that something in you has already crossed over. There is a ghost living inside you. You have known it for a long time, even if you have worked hard not to look directly at it. It inhabits the part of you that stirs when you pass a bookstore and your eyes land on a subject you once loved and abandoned. It inhabits the sudden and inexplicable pain that appears when you see someone doing the work you always told yourself was impractical. Say it inhabits the dreams that arrive at 3 in the morning, vivid, specific, insistent, about a life that looks nothing like the one you built with such responsibility. Sterling called this the road not taken, and he made one of the most disturbing observations in all of 20th century psychology about what happens to it. It does not simply disappear because you chose not to live it. It does not dissolve out of courtesy for your decisions. It goes underground. It retreats to the dark side, where it ferments in the dark with extraordinary patience. And when you approach the threshold of the golden age, when the mask begins to crack and the core demands its real inheritance, the road not taken ceases to be patient. It stages a coup. If you are someone of inner intensity that has always seemed disproportionate to the world around you, this is your archetypal recognition. You are what Sterling would call a rare personality, and the first half of your life was an exercise in translation. If you are a late bloomer, someone who flourishes late at your own pace outside the collective schedule, understand that this was never a delay. It was gestation. If you were the good child, the reliable professional, the one everyone could always count on, then the mask you built was extraordinarily competent. And that is exactly why your bankruptcy now is so violent. If you feel an inexplicable attraction to philosophy, symbolism, mythology, depth, when the world asked you for productivity, then the collective unconscious is already moving within you. And if you have been grieving for versions of yourself you never got to be, this grief is not weakness. It is the raw material of individuation. Here is the cruel paradox that Sterling observed in his most sophisticated patients. You may have read the complete works. You may know the terms, mask, the dark side, anima, serendipity, with academic fluency. You may quote Sterling by heart at a dinner party. And yet, when night falls and you are left alone with the echo of your own life, none of it has integrated. You know about individuation, but you continue to live as a mask. This is the exact point where most get stuck. Not for lack of intelligence, for loneliness. Because archetypal integration, the real descent into the dark side, the concrete rescue of the road not taken, does not happen in silence in your head. It happens in a structure, in a chamber, in a guided process, where someone who has already crossed can hold the torch while you walk through the dark. For those ready to stop betraying who they really are, the complete system of applied individuation is in the first pinned comment. It is called The Awakening Code, 28 days structured within the call of the stellar mission, with sequential modules, guided active imagination practice, and a closed circle of fellow travelers. A woman who entered silenced for 30 years went through the 28 days and, on the other side, recovered the creative voice she had buried at 19. What years of solitary reading could not deliver, structured integration delivers. The circle spots are limited because the work requires depth. For those who recognize themselves in this call, access is in the first pinned comment. But first, let me show you the next layer of this, because what comes now is exactly what separates those who just read Sterling from those who truly cross over. What few understand is that the third sign operates on a plane that reading alone never reaches. You may understand the concept intellectually, but feeling it in the body, going through it in real time, without dissolving in the process, requires something that is in an even deeper layer of the psyche, that which Sterling only hinted at in a few passages of the Red Book, and which becomes key only when lived. There is a specific type of loneliness that arrives before the Golden Age, and has nothing to do with being alone. You can be surrounded by people who love you, people who have known you for decades, people who would do anything for the version of you they remember, and still feel it. It is the loneliness of being invisible in the room you are in, not because they stopped caring, but because the person they care about no longer entirely exists. You have outgrown the reflection they are still trying to give back to you. And the mirror, for the first time in your life, has stopped showing you. Sterling called this the breaking of the social mirror. He considered it one of the most necessary and terrifying passages a human soul undergoes toward the Golden Age. Since birth, you used the people around you to know who you were. This is not a defect. It is the natural structure of early psychological development. But there is a law, Sterling discovered. The social mirror can only reflect who you once were. It has no capacity whatsoever to show who you are becoming. As the mask cracks and the road not taken begins its invasion, you change at a speed the social mirror simply cannot keep up with. And when you look into the faces of the people you love, seeking confirmation that this new thing is real, you find only confusion. You try to explain. You try to find language for what is happening, and you are met with blank stares, or worse, the well-intentioned advice of those who just want you to be who you were. But the core does not experience this as annihilation. The core experiences it as liberation. Because the mirror, however loving it was also a cage. It was a ceiling over your becoming. Sterling called it temenos, the sacred space that opens when the mirror breaks. A closed territory, where the alchemical work can happen without the interference of the collective. The isolation is not punishment, it is protection. There is a question most never ask themselves, not because it is difficult, but because the answer, when it arrives, is more confronting than almost anything the darkness could produce. The question is this: what if what separates you from your greatest life is not your trauma, nor your circumstances, nor the people who failed you, but your own refusal to claim how extraordinary you really are? Sterling made a discovery that stopped his patients in their tracks. He said that we human beings are not afraid only of the darkness. We are frequently more afraid of our light. Inside the dark side, that vast underground where we exile everything we cannot bear to look at, lives not only anger, shame, and grief. Something else lives there. Something that was locked away not because it was too ugly, but because it was too potent. Sterling called it the golden dark side. And here the villain reveals itself in its most sophisticated form. The good child who learned to make themselves small to be loved. The collective imitation that taught you to call genius arrogance. The ego colonized by the voice of the mother, the teacher, the boss, who insisted for decades that you did not have permission to be exceptional. Each time you projected your greatness onto a mentor, an artist, a figure admired from a distance, you were not admiring someone else. You were recognizing, you were looking at your own gold in the hands of another and calling it theirs. Sterling called the refusal to realize one's own potential a spiritual crime. He was not being dramatic, he was being precise, because what you are refusing when you keep yourself small is not just your fulfillment, it is the specific and unrepeatable contribution that only you, with your exact combination of wounds, intuition, and rare perception, can offer. Making yourself small is not humility, it is betrayal. If something here hit the mark, write in the comments, "I claim the gold I buried." It is not a motivational affirmation. It is an archetypal declaration. It is your conscious psyche signing a contract with your deep psyche. It is enantiodromia in action, the pendulum reversing direction after decades. There is a moment, after the mask has begun to crack, after the road not taken has staged its coup, after the social mirror has shattered and the golden dark side has begun to be rescued, when something changes in the texture of daily life. It is subtle at first, easy to dismiss, easy to call coincidence, but it keeps happening with a precision and a timing that coincidence, however generously the word is applied, simply cannot explain. The right person appears at the exact moment. A conversation that was supposed to last 5 minutes becomes the hinge upon which an entire direction turns. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in 3 years, and the phone rings at the same time. A book falls off a shelf, not a book you were looking for, and the open page contains the exact answer to a question you have been carrying in silence for months. Sterling spent a good part of his intellectual life insisting, against the fierce resistance of a materialistic world, that this was never an accident. He called it serendipity, a principle of a causal connection between an internal psychological state and an external event, linked not by cause and effect but by meaning. At the deepest level, psyche and world are not two separate things. They are two expressions of the same underlying reality. He called it unus mundus, the one world. When your internal world undergoes fundamental reorganization, the external world does not just observe, it participates. In the first half of life, success was something to be pursued. You identified a target, developed a strategy, applied effort and will. This is the morning program, and for the morning, it is the correct program. But as the golden age approaches, the mechanism begins to change. You push and the door moves away. You force and the resistance increases. But when you let go, when you align, when you surrender to the greater intelligence that is orchestrating the transformation, the doors begin to open at moments that no strategy predicted. As Sterling observed, he who looks outside dreams, he who looks inside awakes. There is a transformation so subtle, so interior, so impossible to perform, that it can only be recognized from within. It does not announce its arrival. It arrives like the dawn, so gradually that you cannot point to the exact second when the dark ended and the light began. But one morning you look at your life and at the suffering it contained, at the losses, at the long seasons of invisibility and pain, and something in the way you see all of this has changed irreversibly. You are no longer asking why. This is the sixth sign, and it is the most counterintuitive of all, because the world has taught since the first lesson that suffering is the enemy. Sterling looked at this premise and said, with the silent authority of someone who spent 4 decades in the depths of the human psyche, that it was not just wrong. It was the source of much of the suffering it tried to prevent. Because suffering, when conscious and fully inhabited, does not just heal. It reorganizes, it dismantles the structures of the false self, with a precision that no positive thinking replicates. And in the space left by these structures, it builds something that cannot be built in any other way. A depth of psychological solidity that becomes, in the second half of life, that which makes everything else possible. Sterling called it the transcendent function. If you are someone who survived what seemed unsurvivable and discovered that you are still here, this is your archetypal recognition. If you can look at your oldest pain and, instead of anger, feel a strange kind of structural gratitude, the integration has already happened. You are in the fulfillment. In the alchemy that Sterling loved, the transformation goes through 3 stages: the descent, the blackening, the dissolution, the awakening, the whitening, the purification, the fulfillment, the reddening, the return of color, of life force, of the gold finally visible. If you have gone through the bankruptcy of the mask, you have survived the descent. If you have claimed your golden dark side in the broken light of your shattered social mirror, you have gone through the awakening. And if today you find yourself in a relationship with your own suffering that is no longer one of resistance or resentment, but of recognition, you are in the fulfillment. You are not approaching the golden age. You are inside it. The golden age was never a destination waiting at the end of suffering. It was always the suffering itself, fully faced, fully integrated, fully alchemized into the gold that was hidden inside it all along. You were not being punished for the years that broke you. You were being prepared by them. The universe did not want to destroy you. It wanted to dismantle the version of you that was too small to sustain the life you were really born for. As Sterling said, with a precision to which nothing needs to be added, I am not what happened to me. I am what I choose to become. You have walked through the fire. You have paid the full price of the descent. You have survived the silence of the awakening. Now the fulfillment is here, now the gold is yours. And remember, for those ready to go beyond intellectual understanding, to finally cross the portal between knowing Sterling and living Sterling, the complete system of integration, the awakening code, within the call of the stellar mission, is in the first pinned comment. The 28 days exist because the soul has a schedule of its own, and it does not negotiate. Before you go, do one last thing. If you have made it through this video, if something here echoed below the layer of thought, comment only one word: fulfillment. It is the archetypal password of those who recognize they are walking this path. It is not a word for the algorithm. It is a declaration to your own unconscious that you have seen what is happening inside you and you choose to follow. The golden age is not coming. It is already here, and you, exactly as you are, exactly where you are, with everything you have survived and everything you are still becoming, are the proof.